All right, so
But you are here.
I am here.
That
So
is the most important.
I survived the 7 plagues of Egypt, and they lost my paintings. Let's see what's going to happen. But that's life, and I'm very happy to be here and very honored to be surrounded by such beautiful people, because I was so angry and with all these toxic thoughts, and then I find so much amazing sharing and loving environments. I don't know if I fit in this panel. No. So I'd rather bring the other side of it. Debord wrote a book that became seminal, which is called The Society of the Spectacle. And I think the arts have never been under so much attack as now. Because if you look at the history of art, how did the arts appear? It was never just about mimicking a form. It's like making a fake Egyptian mummy. It has no religious symbolism. To a real Egyptian, that would be sacrilege. So it's not about mimicking shapes or mimicking all that nonsense, because we are a materialistic society. We perceive things as products. And that needs to be debated and heavily brought up in this kind of discussions. We are starting to confuse and conflate art with either entertainment or a product. When you look at the history of art, it was always a channel. And artists, whether you're religious or not, because let's not talk now about religion as an organized thing. Let's talk about spirituality. Artists were always at the forefront of social changes. Artists do channel things that society takes decades to realize. We work with the collective unconscious. This is our job. Our job is not only mimicking forms or creating products. I think that when a civilization collapses, and in my opinion ours collapsed long ago, it's not a civilization anymore. I see a jumble of atomized individuals. I see no networks. So if we were a brain, I see billions of individualized neurons, but no possible connection even between two human beings, let alone the whole of society. You know, this connection has been fragmented by technology, in my opinion. I don't think social media created it, no. That existed way before social media. And this existed in many civilizations in history, this fragmentation, but social media accelerated it. And what we are witnessing now is a shell of what art used to be. Because I find this quite dramatic, that we almost have to explain now the most basic when we are making discussions about art. We became so dissociated from the artistic mindset that now it has to be justified. Now it has to be explained, when actually it used to be a part of what we were as a humanity, as a collective humanity. What I would like to say is that Debord, when he wrote The Society of the Spectacle, he predicted this more than 50 years ago, roughly, something like that. And it's a book that we should all read. It's a book that will challenge our notions of what art is. The spectacle now is so permanent that even if you have the best painting in the world put there in a corner, out of context, so if you don't say it's in the Louvre, and if you don't say this is made by a genius, whatever that means, because you know, if we were Egyptians, we would be admiring hieroglyphs. Obviously, it's very contextual and it's very based on your society, what genius means. Our tastes evolved, you know. We are a product of the 21st century, and the way we look at art is a product of the 21st century as well. But let's now forget that for a second. Let's put a painting that is really qualitatively superior to anything that most people can paint. Put it there in the corner. People don't stop to look at it for more than 2-3 seconds. There are many studies made by art museums worldwide since the 1960s, if I'm not mistaken, with cameras, by the way. And cameras measure how much time people actually spend looking at quality art. We have the finest examples that our civilization has produced in some of the world's museums. In the 1960s, the average time spent looking at a painting was approximately 30 seconds. Now, it's less than 5. Let those numbers sink. We confused art with the experience of the observer. Mental health is not about this. We are trying to do Mental Health Week, right? So I need to bring this topic. Mental health is not about self-centeredness. The biggest thing that art could do in the past, in my opinion, and a very powerful thing, was to force you, if you were willing, to look at the world from the point of view of another mind. It was about communication. So actually, when we listen to Bach, let's talk about music because I'm surrounded by musicians all around, and then they will hit me if I don't.
No pressure.
No pressure. But when you listen to Bach, for example, you are transplanted into a mindset that is not only Bachian, but it's also from his culture, from the Baroque period. There's so much in there. It's almost like you are taken on a tour of humanity, of the world. You're taken to a different country, you are taken to a different century, you meet different kinds of peoples than the ones you would interact with on a normal basis, different religious beliefs, different language. All of that nowadays is being obliterated, and it's not about anymore trying to enter the mind of someone else. It's not anymore about empathy, which was the gel that united society. It became about our personal experience. This is so shallow when we look at the history of art. Do you really think that Egyptian pyramids were built for our personal enjoyment? Do you really think they were built to trigger our emotions? No, of course not. There were different purposes throughout the history of art. And what I just want to conclude with this. I've lost all my paintings for the time being. So I have to use words to describe a visual experience. I'm not in favor of that. I think that the philosopher appropriately named Immanuel Kant did was try to explain a visual phenomenon through books that were this thick and that explained nothing. So I'm sorry, German philosophers, but you talk too much about things you don't really grasp. And what happened in the Faculty of Fine Arts, I need to share this with you because you talked about painful experiences. Yes. In the Faculty of Fine Arts, we intellectualized so much the act of painting that painting became taboo. Actually, it has been taboo since the 1920s. All over Europe and so-called developed worlds, and I put developed between quotation marks because I think it's the most psychotic, neurotic view on life. But the West demonized artistic expression, at least in the visual arts. And Antonio and I were having a conversation last night about this. What I see happen in the visual arts, then I see society swallowing it up whole a few decades later. Usually, artists are a few decades ahead for the good or for the bad to what's coming. So in the visual arts, painting became taboo. If you were a really good painter, if you wanted to learn good, solid technique, that was forbidden. It has to be good to be bad. It has to be bad to be good. This is like a doublespeak of 1984, you know, George Orwell. So we created the ugliest art, but we give it the highest meanings. And this dissociation between feelings, aesthetics, and thought, I think are the root cause of a lot of problems we're having in society nowadays. We are compartmentalizing an experience that could be whole. Does this make sense to some of you at least? I'm not expecting you all to agree because you didn't go through the hardships of training as an artist. All the attacks that society launches at you every time you do something truly beautiful. Because there is this hatred for beauty. Look at our architecture nowadays. I think we live in the ugliest cities in history. There is an hatred for beauty. I don't know where it comes from, but it stems from, I believe, I'm under the impression at least, this dissociation between different aspects of life. To conclude, because I don't want to bore you, but if you produce something beautiful, you would be immediately considered bourgeois. That probably means you're painting for some royal palace. You know, it can't be beautiful to be art. Now, in music, thank goodness, we still haven't embraced 100% this love for ugliness. In popular music, we have. Just turn on the radio and look at the rubbish. Yes.
I'm not entirely sure if you have been listening to modern classic music.
Horrible. It's the worst music as well. It's modern classical music, you know, the so-called contemporary. But
Berlin is acceptable. Yes.
there is worse. Yeah. Oh God, Thomas Hades, is that his name? No, forgot now. Anyway, but back to this. In the other arts, you still need a modicum of technique. For example, if you can't even keep your balance, you can't pretend that you're a ballet dancer. You know, nobody would accept you. But in the arts, you can paint like a child and be lauded as a master. This dissociation between knowledge, feeling, and technique, in my opinion, is a huge problem. And the arts are therapeutical, of course they are, as long as you're not a professional artist. Then there is no therapy. I mean, look at professional artists, they're usually wackos. Do you really think that the arts are therapeutic? Your shoes are like my... But I love them. But jokes aside, art is therapeutic, of course. This is the topic of this conversation, I believe. One of the topics. But when you do it professionally, the obstacles that society puts in your way are so unsurmountable, are so immense, that you actually have to be crazy not to go depressed with what's happening. And now, yes, it's all replaceable. We are all interchangeable because it became a product. I just want to share on a more positive side. I've used art with lots of people that suffer from not terminal cancer, because I don't have the ability to deal with those circumstances. With the Portuguese League Anti-Cancer is every time a patient, the doctor says your cancer technically, temporarily, at least for now, disappeared, we offer them a free art course so they can start their life afresh. And you should have seen people's reactions when they finally start to see the world. It takes a few lessons, but when you learn painting, it totally radically changes the way you perceive reality. The tears in their eyes. And the thing I want to share with you, the story that touched me the most was actually from a lady. She's from Dubai. A multi-millionaire. She had all the money in the world, but she could not be saved from blindness. So she had a disease that she was going to lose her sight. She was 50-something, and then she started taking painting classes. Initially, I didn't know she had this illness. But I did notice that at the end of every lesson, her eyes were tearful, she was smiling, and she used to say things like, "Oh, now I can see." And I was like, what does this mean? The loveliest lady, by the way. After about 7 or 8 lessons, I inquired and I said, "What do you mean by now I can see?" And then she told me, "Every day I am grateful to Allah because He inspired me to take painting lessons." And then she finally explained she had a progressive illness. She was going to lose her sight in roughly 1.5 years. But because of the painting lessons, she was recollecting this bank of images in her memory so that she will be able to recall life once she goes blind. This is also the essence of art. Art is like that Greek god Proteus. He shapeshifts. So for example, it turns into a snake. If you try to catch it, it turns into water and it runs through your fingers. If you try to put it into a bucket, the water will evaporate into a cloud. There is a Greek god like that. And I think the arts are exactly that. And no matter how much we try as a civilization to nail and define art, the moment we grab that god, he will surprise us by shape-shifting again. And I have to agree with you about the algorithms, because I think that shape-shifting is the surprise element that we all crave for. So when we create art that is totally predictable, then we move on. We can't get stuck with the same, ever, right? Art is very difficult to define because it's going to morph into something else very soon.